You're listening to Shameless Feminine Speaks with your host, modern-day shaman and sister to all, Rebecca Haywood, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Shameless Feminine Speaks. My name is Rebecca Haywood, and I am your host of this show, and I'm flying solo today. My dear, sweet, shameless Sheena is going to be on the phone with us today. Her sweet little body was not feeling well today, so she is broadcasting from her bed at home. So hold on. Hi, darling. Are you there?
Hi, it's me from my bed. Yeah, wow, what a year it's been, right? So here I am in my bed again.
Shameless Sheena from the bedroom.
Shameless, nothing can keep me down, even almost passing out at LA Talk Radio this morning.
This sounds like maybe this should be like a different topic of the show. Shameless Sheena from her bedroom. Oh, but today,
are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
All right. Yeah, so today's topic, everyone, is that superpower of emotion, which is one of my all-time favorite superpowers, my favorite feminine superpowers. How about you, Sheena?
Absolutely. You betcha.
Yeah.
But, aren't all feminine superpowers our favorite? Kind of for me, they are.
I know. I think we might say this every time. But I really love helping people to embrace their emotions. It has been such a joy to watch. Specifically, there was one woman on this last retreat. I just got back from Mexico, from Teotihuacan. And there was one woman that was on this retreat who, refused to cry, actually, from a young age. She made that agreement with herself that she just wouldn't let anybody see her cry. And so, after some time of working with herself and working with me and busting that myth wide open, my goodness, you wouldn't recognize this woman and the power that she has discovered in really embracing her emotions. I mean, she is a powerhouse of a healer now, and really her ability to channel all of that. You understand that as an empath, right, Sheena?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, emotion is really, I call it it's one of my senses, really.
Yeah.
It's one of the ways that I perceive what's going on inside of me, of course, but it's also how I perceive what's going on with others around me or even in the world. And, once I cleaned up myself, then a lot of times the question is, I look around before I look at myself. It used to always be that I looked at myself first. What was going on in my mind? What lie was I believing? How was I hurting myself, going against myself? Which emotion is an amazing indicator of that. And as you know, once you clean up all that stuff, then it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, let's look around. Who am I feeling here? Because it's not me, or even just tuning into what's going on in the world. I don't necessarily have to tune into the news to know that something's happening. Yeah. So it's an amazing superpower. And yet, like many feminine superpowers, how many times have you been told as a woman that you're too emotional? Right? I mean, for you, Sheena, has that been a big aspect of, working in the man's world?
Oh, I believe that we have masculine and feminine in us, right? And that people can have different leniencies in different places. And I tend to be intellectually very male, so I'm not into drama. I have kind of a sharp sense of humor. I'm very work-oriented. But emotionally, I'm very female. And I find that many people are surprised when they get to know me, how soft I am, or at least they were before I started doing spiritual work full-time, becoming very open about my spirituality and my spiritual gifts. People were always very surprised to find out, wow, you're so sensitive, because people who are funny or flashy or, have a dirty sense of humor were thought to be very tough and very masculine. So when there is vulnerability, some of the people were like, wow, you're very soft on the inside. And I think, well, where have you been? So, of course.
Well, I don't know
But yeah,
are you watching the live stream, Sheena? Or are you just
I am. Look at my giant head sitting in the chair.
Well, I don't know if you can see. I bought you an emotional support kitty in Teotihuacan.
Oh, no, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. I'm going to go look on a bigger screen. I'll turn it on my computer so I can see it on a bigger screen.
Yeah.
I need an emotional support kitty, especially this year, because this has been a year where I just need a hug a lot.
Oh, sweetie. Well, and I need your emotional support kitty right now because I feel kind of naked sitting here without my Sheena, my shameless Sheena.
You're doing beautifully, but you're not. I'm right here, and I'm always with you, sweetheart, and we'll always be together, even if one of us can't be in the studio at the same time as each other.
I know you are. I know you are. So yeah, well, I just love that you know, that aspect of what people expect from you, based on, you know, you're a comic, right? You're a comedian, so.
Right,
you know,
that's how and an actor, and I always played the kind of crazy, you know, wild, funny acting roles, or very severe, crazy, dramatic roles. So people just assumed I didn't need anything.
Right.
And even now, sometimes people will say, well, wait a minute, you know, you need help? And so it became a thing with me of being very embarrassed to ask for help. And it was really, I was just telling a client this yesterday, it was really this journey of the last 6 months of walking with a cane, getting stronger, having to have people help me, people seeing that there's a weakness in me has really helped me, I think, more than it's helped them, because I needed to know that it was okay for me to be that vulnerable and that I didn't have to always be the one taking care of things. I mean, right down to this morning when I had this bout with dizziness and almost passed out at LA Talk Radio, and Sam and Ronan were so beautiful, and my guests who had come all the way from Hollywood to be on the show and then had to go home were so wonderful and took such beautiful care of me. And it's really renewed something in my heart that people are out there to take care of me, and I don't have to sort of build a shell around me of being, you know, like what my mama called the little red hen, like I can do it myself, and not ever need any help, because we all need each other, and we can't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, it's true also very much in the spiritual world that there's an expectation that we're allowed certain emotions but not others. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that this is something, a big myth that I want to bust for all you spiritual folks out there, that, you know, we have the complete weather pattern, and that's really what we need to do, is embrace the whole rainbow of emotions. And that's where we really develop that superpower of emotion. It's not just that we're always happy, blissed out all the time. That's a very one-dimensional way of being, and it's not really true. It's not really authentic. And you know, if we're always gearing ourselves towards that, then, as you know, as an empath, what are we shutting out from other people, right? What are we shutting out from other people? What are we shutting out from ourselves? And it's kind of like having a very limited vocabulary. You know, that emotional vocabulary then is very limited and limiting on what you, how you can connect with other people, and how you can connect with spirit, even, because spirit, you know, doesn't speak only in happy, bliss, right? There's a whole spectrum between the agony and the ecstasy. And, you know, I've been in very deep places, like on this journey, and I have felt deep sorrow, deep sorrow. I have felt the pangs of anger, and all of that was part of me processing for humanity, you could say, and for myself and for the women in that group. And if I wasn't willing to go there, then what would I have shut out, right? From their experience, from my ability to clean the air, right? Like a good lightning and thunder and rainstorm cleans the air, right? So let us not deny ourselves that. Absolutely.
I agree 100%. I feel the same way in my spiritual work. So many people will say the first thing when anything happens to me physically, somebody will say, oh, you need to stop doing this and stop seeing clients, and you're taking on too much. And the truth is that, first of all, you know, taking on clients, helping other people to find their true core and their true happiness actually exhilarates me. It doesn't drain me. And I will never be a person anymore in my life, now that I have opened up truly, that will not want all of the emotions of the world to move through me all the time.
Yeah.
I just need to sometimes understand that I need to keep making physical adjustments so that my vessel can hold all of that spiritual energy flow and not fall apart, because our bodies are so fragile compared to our souls.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, absolutely. There's nothing that feels better than knowing that you are in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
and that other people's pain and hurt and confusion and trepidation and worry are all sort of flowing through you, and you're sort of processing it to heal it, and then letting it flow back into them, like a water processing plant, but for spirituality and emotions. And I'm so honored to have that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of folks don't understand that every day they're taking in other people's things, or like you said, they're watching the news and taking in things from the world, and they have no idea how to let any of it go. And so, you have to free yourself up of the things that are binding you, whether they're your own things from your own past and your own experiences, or whether they're things that you're taking in from others. It's so important that we continually refresh ourselves and cleanse ourselves of all of the things we're picking up along the way. Just like we wouldn't go through life and never take a shower, you know?
Right.
Well, maybe somebody would, but I probably should.
A day or two.
Yeah, that's it. That's my limit.
Well, I love your analogy to a water processing plant, like a filtration system. Right? And,
exactly.
in Teotihuacan, along the Avenue of the Dead, there are several plazas. And each of these plazas represent a different aspect of the human, right? So the first plaza is the plaza of earth or body. And the second plaza is the plaza of water, or guess what? Emotion.
Beautiful.
And yeah, so and that's absolutely, I'm a water baby, right? I am a double Scorpio, Cancer, Moon, and I've got Scorpio all over the place on my chart. So I am like absolutely a water baby, and I love to feel. I love it. It's like chocolate to me, or maybe even ice cream, maybe both. Ice cream with chocolate. I love emotions, and all of them. There's not one that I don't love. Now, I certainly had to work at that, right? And I think that that's part of, with all of the shame that we have placed on our emotions, on our superpower of emotions, we, have kind of handpicked certain ones that are okay, and they're okay if they look this way, but not that way. And the rest of them we either keep to ourselves, right? We only experience behind closed doors, or, we even hide them from ourselves. We completely repress those emotions because they're absolutely not okay. And yet, what does that do, right? That stifles us, right? And it doesn't actually allow the emotion, which is actually very watery by nature, to flow, as you said, right? If we can allow something to flow into us, and it will just as easily flow out, right? If we allow it to. Another way that I like to refer to emotion is emotion, energy in motion. Yeah. And so the key is to keep it in that motion, right? And to keep it in that watery essence that it really is. And yet, with all of our stories about emotions, what we end up doing is fixing them, right? We fix them into place in our body, right? By judging them and repressing them instead of allowing them to flow out in their natural state. We're stuffing them and holding them, and we're even distorting them, right? So now something that may have just been a little bit of sadness gets distorted into complete sorrow, right? Or jealousy, right? We start to distort these emotions that then they do become somewhat poisonous to our body because they're no longer in their natural frequency, their natural state, because of the story that we've told about them. Do you notice that in your clients, Sheena, and in yourself?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we need to be very careful just generally in the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and about our lives, because sometimes they're literally just that. They're just stories. And we are living on something that's a myth, because we've decided it's true. Yeah. And I think a lot of our work on the earth, in each incarnation of what I like to call soul school, our lives, is to work through the truth of who we are underneath the story that we've told ourselves about ourselves, and the story that we've told ourselves about others. Sometimes that's just a myth too. Mm-hmm. We get an idea in our head that somebody feels a certain way about us, or somebody thinks a certain way about us, and sometimes that's not true either. Mm-hmm. So I think that definitely the closer the bond to our emotions, the more we can get away from that, just telling that story about us. Yeah, is really the road to happiness and to finding ourselves. And I think that's a lot of the beautiful work that we both do as light workers, is to help people to really sort of find out, who they are under the lump of clay, right? Where's the beautiful statue in the lump of clay?
Yes, absolutely. And emotions are like one of our truest gauges of that, right? So that's one of the reasons that I love guiding my clients and my students to developing what I call emotional presence, where they can really tune in to their watery essence, right? And because the emotions don't lie to you. They really don't. They might be reacting to a lie, right? A lie that we're telling ourselves, and then the emotion responds. But the emotions themselves will always tell you the truth. They'll always tell you, yes, I'm reacting to this lie you just told me. Or, they'll take a read on somebody else, right? They'll get that direct hit. Remember being a kid, you knew the moment you walked into a room that your parents had just been arguing, right? Like you had that sense. It was in the air still. And you could feel it. Yeah. And maybe you didn't have a name for it. You didn't exactly have a story about it, but you didn't want to be in that room anymore, right? You wanted to go outside and play. And, this is the thing about emotions. We've developed such a language for them, even naming, anger, joy, sadness, jealousy, even just putting a name on them is fixing them in a way, right? Rather than just allowing them to flow in their natural state. And so it's interesting because I know a lot of therapists really encourage you to, how does that feel? And use an emotion word, use a feeling word, right? And I just cringe at that because, to me, yummy is a feeling word. Right? And that will describe it perfectly well how I am feeling. Yummy right now. I'm feeling it's so yummy. So, I feel that it's actually better to let go of these labels that we place on our emotions because, I use the analogy of a rainbow. And when you're looking at a rainbow and you're looking for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, then that's what you see, right? You see all those colors delineated. Yet if you let go of that and you soften your gaze and you stop looking for the distinct colors, then what do you see? You start to see all the colors between. You start to see the full spectrum of that rainbow. And there's so many colors between red and orange. So many, right? So to me, that's my relationship with emotions, is to even let go of those labels. And of course I use them to communicate with people because, I have to communicate with people on occasion, right? And yet with myself, I allow that free form. I just tune in and I allow, instead of telling a story about the emotion, I allow the emotion to tell me its story. Because every emotion will speak back to you if you simply listen, And, Sheena, the reason I wanted to do this topic today was actually our show 2 weeks ago, Painting Our White Flag Red.
Right.
And if you recall the acronym that I had given on the sorry, and the first letter, being S, was shame. And the question, was whose shame is it? What is the underlying shame and whose is it? Is it theirs or is it yours? And the medicine was to just shift into the shameless, right? To go from shame to shameless. So to remove the shame about it. And to get there was the embrace. And if you remember, I was talking about, just put love in front of it, right? If you love something as if it were your own child, if you love that shame as if it were your own child, then it will eventually stop crying, right? You just hold it with all that love. And yet, I got some feedback on that it's like, okay, yes, I know how to love a child, and yet there was a barrier for this person in being able to love that particular shame. And man, I can so relate to that. So many aspects of my own shame, of carrying so many sexual trauma events in my body, that I wanted to be tougher than them. I wanted to be smarter than them. I didn't want to be ruled by that trauma in my life. And so it was really hard for me to turn around and love that, especially that place that still felt like a victim, because, I was better than that. I was bigger than that. I was stronger than that. And so I had a hard time embracing that victim place and all her emotions because I judged her as weak, right? And so that's why I really wanted to talk about today, because our emotion today and how to really embrace this as a superpower. Because I realized that, it's easy for me to sit where I am today and say, just put love in front of it. Just love it as if it were your own child. And yet for me to be able to do that in my life, there were several steps. It was dismantling all of my judgments about emotion, and really basically, simply put, to befriend each emotion. And so do you find that for yourself, Sheena, that there are certain emotions that you're still just kind of like, nope, not allowed?
Not so much not allowed, but I certainly think there are emotions that I kind of stuff down inside because I have to continue to go on with my day. Mm-hmm. And there are things that if I start dwelling on them, I know it's going to be like opening up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, the numbness that I feel around my mother's death is a good example of that. It's not like I don't feel since my mother died, but I definitely feel from a distance since my mother died.
Yeah.
And I don't know that will ever be different. I hope so. I hope it will be different one day, but it's part of the grieving process. I think if I actually really opened that up and threw some salt in it right now, that it would probably break me in half. So I think that we deal with things sometimes as we can, because we're all just trying to hold it together every day. I don't think I truly have dealt with how disturbing this year has been for me from a physiological standpoint and an emotional standpoint. I let it out little bits at a time, and I let it out as I heal other people, and I talk about it on the air and in video, and that's sort of how I get it out there. But I think there are instances where, yeah, sure, there are things that I haven't fully brought to the surface. I think if I was able to bring every emotion to the surface and deal with it immediately, I probably wouldn't need to come back here and be in a meat suit anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that example of grief as one of those because, I have a different experience with grief as with my grandfather, who was very, very dear to me. And when he passed, it wasn't exactly unexpected, right? And yet it was very sad, of course, to lose his presence here. And same with Madre Sarita when she passed. It really ripped my heart. And yet in that grieving process, as I allowed that grieving process to happen in my body, what I started to experience was that I was getting closer to them rather than further away. Does that make sense? It was like by allowing myself to miss them and to yearn for them, I brought their presence closer and into me. By allowing myself to remember them, suddenly I was remembering my grandfather's great jokes and smiling and laughing. And suddenly, his voice was inside of me. And I was hearing things from him that I hadn't heard in life, right? And I'm sure you've experienced that with your mother, when you steal those moments away to remember her, even to cry for not having her in the physical, right? That you feel that closeness, that somehow they come more to life inside of you when we allow ourselves to grieve and to step inside of our yearning to have them with us, right? So that's a beautiful example, because I don't know that the grief ever really goes away. I certainly miss Sarita in the physical. I miss my grandfather in the physical. And, oh boy, I miss my dog Mila in the physical, And I feel that bit of sadness when I want them here and they're not. And yet I know that by allowing myself to feel that sadness and that yearning for them, that it calls them closer to me. And suddenly I don't feel lonely. Suddenly I can almost feel their touch on my hand, or smell Mila's fur, So there's something really beautiful that each emotion is a channel unto itself, and that can open us to an experience, right? Like it can open us to, your mother, right? Even though she's passed from physical form. It can open us to the experience of another in our lives, right? Through that superpower of empathy, right? Where we're really truly now perceiving them from the inside, right? Rather than from the outside, or only experiencing them through our mind, right? And very much the same with ourselves. So many people are walking a spiritual path, and many have kind of landed on these self-help techniques that are very kind of psychologically oriented. And I just really feel for them, because I know for me, when I really transformed all the beliefs in my mind, the key shift for me was transforming them from the inside out, which for me was an emotional thing. And once I could shift that emotional channel in my body, then it kind of annihilated the thought form that had created that emotional channel. Because, as we have neural pathways in our body, and those kind of get etched in, these pathways, these emotional pathways in our body. And so the more we experience anger, for example, it becomes etched in until it becomes an automatic reflex, right? And so if we, instead of turning away from that and just trying to shut down that channel, that doesn't really work. But if we can turn to that channel and start to embrace that channel, start to bring and breathe love into that channel of anger, then it starts to shift, right? It starts to shift. It gets more light. Its frequency starts to shift because we're breathing love into it, right? And certainly it's been proven that just practicing refrain, right? Refraining from getting angry, that eventually it'll recede that channel so it's not an automatic response anymore. And yet, are you never allowed to experience anger, right? And what happens when anger is called for, right? But you've developed this relationship with anger that is not okay. That was certainly my relationship with anger, where it just wasn't okay in my world. To me, being angry, that was the bitch. I didn't want to be contrary. That was one of the ways that I kept myself safe with all of my trauma. Just don't get angry. And yet there I was, not standing up for myself when I was rightfully so pissed off, right? And all that it really took for me to step through that was to love my anger. I gave myself permission. Like, I am just going to allow myself to get angry over anything and everything if I want to for the next 2 weeks. And I'm going to befriend this emotion. And, my poor boyfriend at the time, poor guy, it was like, who is this woman? But I gave him fair warning, and he handled it beautifully. And, one day when I was just like in a fit, and he just sat down on the bed with me and looked me in the eyes, and he just said, I love your anger. I love your anger. And I just burst into tears, realizing that no one had ever loved my anger before. No one had ever loved my anger before. It was always a problem, right? It was the problem child. It was the bitch. It was the contrary one. And no one had actually embraced my anger. And I think that that particular emotion is very true for many women, that we're not allowed to get angry.
I think that is absolutely true. Yes, we're not supposed to get angry, then we're not being feminine. Anger is a male emotion, right?
Right.
Quote unquote.
Quote unquote.
So
yes.
you're not being a good girl if you get angry. You're supposed to, which is, I think we see that all the time, right? We see it in a media stage, right? Whether it's athletics or entertainment or politics. When a man gets angry, he's being assertive. When a woman gets angry, she's, oh, what's her problem? She must be hysterical. Does she have her period?
Yeah.
I mean, case in point, here's a good case in point that I will make, that, we grew up with, I love tennis. We grew up with John McEnroe screaming at the refs every 5 minutes, right? Serena Williams does it once, and it makes the headlines for like 6. Oh, what's wrong with her? How could she do that? Even though, in all honesty, she's 10 times the tennis player he ever was, and has 10 times at least the awards that he has. But wow, what was she thinking saying something to a ref? Well, how could she speak up like that?
Right.
And so I think that we ought to, I don't even think as a society we realize that we do it. You look at the way that the media, we have so many men and now so many women running for president, and you see the way that the media handles both of them. I don't even know that they even realize that they do it. But it's so gauged towards men and so critical of women, and it's women doing it too. It's not just men.
Right.
So we do it to each other, as I'll probably bring up on every single show, Rebecca. We do it to each other. But yes, there's definitely, so we as women growing up in our society, we think, oh wow, maybe I'm not supposed to be angry, or I'm not supposed to say anything, or somebody will think less of me if I dare to speak about how I'm feeling. And that it builds up, when you're not allowed to speak your truth, it builds up toxicity inside of you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that can be done about that. That's you have to get that toxicity out and learn how to stop allowing it to build up in you.
Yeah, when I made that choice to befriend my anger, I mean, it wasn't pretty. There was nothing graceful about my anger at first, because there was so much that had been left unfelt inside of me. And so it was very overwhelming for my body when I kind of lifted the floodgate, right? It would come and my hands would shake, and I couldn't think of words. I couldn't speak well. It wasn't graceful. And yet by allowing that, lifting those floodgates, it was kind of like, just letting all of that energy that had been pent up for so long finally have a place to go. And eventually, with time, anger has become, a buddy to me, a good friend to me, because that anger is that place inside of us that is standing up for our integrity. It's that place that says no, and no can be loving, right? No can be loving. No to them is usually a yes to you. And so, I've really learned that to not, bite my tongue so much, and to actually open it and let it speak. And now it's not such a thunderous storm that comes through, but there's definitely a fire there, and there's definitely a bite. And yet now, because I trust my anger, because I trust myself, and I love myself regardless of their response, my anger doesn't have to be so loud. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's like
I feel the same way about mine. I don't feel that I need to get angry anymore, because now I feel more comfortable speaking my truth.
Yes. Yeah. You can see people, I call it the little dog syndrome, where, they're afraid of their anger, or they have whatever that is. Like sometimes they're afraid of their anger. Sometimes they felt like unheard in their lives, or they feel small, right? They feel that not enough that we spoke about a couple weeks ago. And so they kind of puff their fur up and get bigger, like, grr, listen to me, like, yeah, I'm right here. I can hear you and I'm listening, And, that's how it was with my anger at first, where it needed to be louder. And it was a little, not so much that I seek to control emotion, but it was definitely, there was a lot of, troubled waters under the surface there once I let it loose. So if you're one of those women that has judged your anger for so long, give yourself permission. If you're in relationship, if you live with somebody, just let them know, that this is something that you're working on, and, give yourself permission, ask for their permission, and then let it loose, because it's the best way is to just start to befriend it, start to embrace it. And this is true with any emotion, whether it's anger or any of the color of the rainbow, is that I actually sat with each and every emotion. I did a meditation for myself for about a month. I did this meditation every day where I would just pick a different emotion, any emotion, whether I was feeling it right now or, I just would conjure one. And I would sit there and just experience it in my body through the eyes of love until that emotion no longer felt like it had such a charge. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And where that emotion could move, it was no longer trapped into one channel in my body. It felt more like water, where it was just free flowing. And as I did that, each emotion really had its own story, right? So often we are experiencing our emotion through the mind, right? We filter it, our experience of an emotion through the mind. We're already telling a story about it. Or that's, how we kind of connect to it. So we're kind of one removed. And in this meditation, I was really seeking for a direct experience of each and every emotion and to kind of dismantle those stories that I had about emotions. And that really was an amazing, amazing practice that I encourage you to do with each and every one of your emotions until they really are just a frequency, and a free-flowing frequency, that they become like the weather pattern of your little planet, where you are allowed to have that thunderstorm, and just as quickly as the thunderstorm rolls in, it rolls out, and now there's this peaceful breeze, and that's really how I experience emotion now, that it is that weather storm or that weather pattern of my body. And because I allow it in that way, not only is my kind of environment more natural and free-flowing, but I'm also have a better gauge, because as I said before, your emotions don't lie to you. And as a healer, Sheena, that your emotions really are a sense. They're a tap into the world around you and to the people that you're working with, or just that you're in relationship with. And it really will help you. So if you can befriend each and every emotion, then you're that much more connected to the all, right? To every expression of life, right?
Absolutely, that's true. Yes, that's absolutely true. The more you're in touch with everything that you are, whether it's your thoughts, your emotions, the way your heart beats, the way the synapses in your brain fire, the way that you feel when you breathe in and breathe out. I mean, the more in touch we are with us, with ourselves, the more, first of all, that's the most important relationship that we have, right, is our connection with ourselves.
Yeah.
And the more in touch that we are with every aspect of ourselves, the more on our spiritual path we are, the more we're becoming more enlightened and more evolved and more connected every day. And I think that we sometimes, the cat would like to speak. I think that we sometimes forget how important connection is in this life journey, in each life journey, whether it's the connection to us, the most important, the connection to spirit, the next most important, the connection to the earth, and then lastly, the connection to others. I think that we don't do enough talk about connecting, and especially connecting to us, being aware of what's going on inside of you all the time. Mm-hmm. Because once you connect with it and you give it a hug and you make friends with it, it's not scary anymore. You just realize what it is, and it is what it is.
Yeah, and I feel that there needs to be more emoting out loud in this world. So often that, let's say we're having an emotional experience that's producing tears, we go into hiding about that, right? Like if we're sitting at a table at lunch with a friend, it's like, oh, suddenly we have to run to the bathroom, right? Or we're trying to hide our face. And to me, I just go, why? Why are we so afraid of emotion? Why is it so not okay? Why am I concerned that this makes them uncomfortable, that I'm sitting here crying? Right? I actually had this experience in Teotihuacan, and it was after this beautiful day of healing with the women, and we were sitting at lunch, and we were actually like right off the Avenue of the Dead, like, so I'm looking at the Pyramid of Quetzalcoatl, and this download starts coming for me. And I was feeling, basically, to summarize, I was feeling and seeing all the women, the ancestors, the feminine ancestors of Teo, waiting to come back in. And I was feeling all of their sorrow. I was feeling all of their pain, all of their rage. And it was just moving through me in these waves of emotion. And there were just tears streaming down my face, and we're sitting here. I think we had already ordered some mezcal, because we were done with our workday, so we thought. And yet this was just this intense, huge surge of emotion that came for me. And with it, that emotion was speaking to me. It was speaking, it had held the voices of the women. It held their stories. It held their history. And in a sense, I was clearing that as I was simply feeling their emotion. And yet I was also downloading basically what they needed from me and from us, the group of women, what we were there to do to help them kind of get back into Teo. And so it was really, really beautiful. And yet, one of the women said, I love that. I love that you were, that you didn't care. You sat there and you allowed these tears to pour through you. You closed your eyes. You were clearly having an experience, and you just went for it. And you didn't worry about, the waiter coming over and, the mezcal are here, and, the food's here, and, how is this impacting everybody else? You just went for it and you did your thing. And clearly that was so important. And it was important. And yet what emotion isn't important? When it hits us, right? When it hits us, it has a message to tell us. They are messengers of healing, whether you're tuning in to some feminine ancestry of Teotihuacan, or you're tuning into your own ancestry in your body, a recent ancestry of just what just happened 5 minutes ago. That emotion is a messenger, just like pain, just like physical pain. It's telling you, hey, I need something. I need something. Right? And Sheena, with all of your experiences as of late, like, if you ignore your physical pain, right, you're not able to help yourself then, right?
No, and this recent thing that I've gone through with dizziness, because of my electrolytes being low. I mean, I'm now constantly checking in with myself to make sure, am I feeling lightheaded? Am I dizzy? Where am I in my surroundings? And, the cautiousness with which I have to make sure that I continue to move with my knees so that they get better, and I don't do something dumb like, damage them so I have to start all over again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you always have to touch base with yourself. And I think we are better at doing that with our physicality than we are at doing that with our emotionality or with our spirituality. Mm-hmm. But those three things are equal parts of our lives. Mm-hmm. And it's just as important that we do it in all aspects of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. People don't perceive emotion as something tangible, and yet, in my world, it's very tangible, because I have developed that emotional presence. And so, in the interest of time, I wanted to do a little meditation with you guys today. But Wonderful. What I'm going to do, we don't really have a whole lot of time. So what I want to do is I want to invite you to go to either my website or my YouTube page. They're also on my Instagram, Shaman Sister. And there's a series of videos that I created. So if you go to RebeccaHaywood.com/gifts for the ghost. So these I created as a result of my chapter in Shamanism in the New Millennium. And it's a series that's really about developing this emotional presence. And it gives you some meditations, some journaling work to do, some inventory work to do, to really walk through this process of befriending each of your emotions and of how to embrace an emotion when it's up for you, and how to tune into that emotion and allow it to tell you its story rather than you imposing a story on it. So I invite you to go and check those out. Gifts for the Ghost. They're also on my YouTube channel. And there I believe they're listed as Developing Emotional Presence. And like I said, on my IGTV, Shaman Sister, you can find them there. So I invite you to do those. I've had a few longtime students that I've worked with, and, I'm a lover of emotions, and I bring people to, befriend their emotional body. And yet I've had certain students that have really had a hard time with that, based on how they were raised, or especially men tend to have a hard time really dropping into their emotional body. And, this one student was so grateful because I just said, okay, watch these videos. And he did it just one time, and it really shifted his world. He just walked through each video. He made the practice of it, and it shifted his world, where now he's not afraid to feel what he feels. He's still kind of hesitant to feel them out loud. And yet it's okay. This is a starting point, because as you said, Sheena, the most important relationship is the one with ourselves. So as long as we are feeling what we feel for ourselves, it's not really anybody else's business. But if we feel what we feel for ourselves, and we're aware of that, and we're having that direct experience and garnering that information directly from the emotion, then we are that much closer to ourselves, right? It's part of living in our body, is living in the emotional body, because that's where the emotions live. So if you're not attached, or if you're not connected to your emotions, then you're not actually embodied, right? You're not completely embodied. You're just, you're in the shell, but what is filling that shell, right? So I encourage you all to go check out those videos, and perhaps we can do a little meditation next time. And I think what I'd like to do with our last 5 minutes is actually just share that, kind of come back to what inspired today's topic, was that aspect that it can be a challenge, right? We can feel challenged to embrace our shame, to embrace something that we view as weak. And I know so many women, we're strong. We know this about ourselves. We're strong. And we have a hard time embracing that place of victim in ourselves. And so what ends up happening is that we end up kind of standing on top of her as a survivor. And yet the victim remains unhealed. And I'll say in my journey, and I share it very intimately in Shamanism in the New Millennium, of my journey of healing sexual trauma, repeated sexual trauma, that I really stepped through all of that on my own before I had even met Madre Sarita. And yet I had shown up at her doorstep as that tough girl. And I was so shut down emotionally. I was happy. I really thought I was happy, but I was just swimming above it all. And so I encourage you, even if you think you're happy, dive below that surface a little bit and see what's really there. Have you really truly embraced that victim? Have you really truly embraced that little girl that was hurt? Have you really, really loved her anger, right? And play that role for yourself. Even sit in front of a mirror. If you don't have, I had that wonderful partner that loved my anger for me. Sit in front of a mirror, give yourself that gift, feel the emotion, and then, have that direct conversation with it, of offering it your love, of offering it your acceptance. It really is very powerful and transformative, and that is the beginning of really stepping from shame to shameless, is that embrace. It's not telling it to simply go be shameless. It's not telling it that it's wrong. It's actually embracing it with your love and holding it like your very own child. Okay? So, and as always, I'm always available for private sessions with people. You can find me at RebeccaHaywood.com. And you can also find me on social media pretty much everywhere as at Shaman Sister. So where can people find you, Sheena?
I'm also available for private sessions, and you can find me pretty much everywhere broadcasting something, radio, video. I'm at Sheena Metal Spiritual, and I am raisingyourvibration.com. And I think if you just Google Sheena Metal, you'll find me. So I appreciate you all reaching out and being wonderful and supporting the show that means so much to me with my beautiful soul, Rebecca, whom I love so much.
Oh, well, I love you, and I'm so appreciative that you were able to call in today. I'm sorry that your body wasn't feeling well, but I'm so happy that you honored yourself. Take a note from this woman, people. Shameless Sheena. This is the way you honor yourself, honor your body. Yeah, don't grin and bear it. You do what you can as much as you can, and sometimes that means going home. Right?
Sure.
So good for you. I'm glad you honored yourself in that way. So, well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And we'll be back here, same time, same bat channel next week. And who knows what we're going to be talking about? I never really know until I know. So, or until one of you asks a question. So again, please join the Facebook group, Shameless Feminine Speaks, and join the Convo Live. I'm sorry I haven't really been able to connect with you guys here, but thank you so much for all of your comments here. And as always, we always dive back in after the show and we comment on all your comments and show you the love. So thank you so much. And you all have a wonderful week. And now I have to push the magic button all by myself. It's very exciting. But we'll be back here next week. I know. Well, of course, now the mouse is not doing anything. Oh, no, Sheena.
You have to push the mouse down to move it.
Aha, I had to click it. Gotcha. Yep. Okay. All right, I'm going to push the magic button, everyone. So that means I'm signing off. Love you so much.
You're listening to Shameless Feminine Speaks with your host, modern-day shaman and sister to all, Rebecca Haywood, right here on LA Talk Radio.